Welcome to Monday's edition of Renew. I'm Pastor Tony Cowan. Thanks for joining us. Let's get right to the point today. For the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about walking in the freedom that we have in Christ Jesus. For this week and next week, we're going to be talking specifically about how to walk in freedom from fears. God did not create mankind with fears. He does not intend for us to walk in fear. Now, I know a lot of people would take issue with that and they think, well, a little fear is good. In fact, how are you going to teach your children not to run out in the middle of the road with, when there's cars running down the road 50 and 60 miles an hour? Well, we should not teach them not to go in the road because of fear, but because of wisdom. I mean, the wisdom of God would tell them not to go out into the road and play in the street, but not fear. God does not want us walking in fear. Now we're going to look at a couple of scriptures today, one in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament. First of all, in Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse number 6, God is instructing His people and also giving them a promise. He said, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear, nor be afraid of them," talking about those who are coming against them. "For the Lord your God, He is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you." And then in Hebrews chapter 13, verse number 5, it says, "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For He Himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you." That in the Greek language would be emphatic. It actually would read this way: "I will never, 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 no, never, ever leave you nor forsake you." There's one thing you can bank on is the fact that when the going gets rough and it gets hot in the kitchen, God's not going to bail on you. He's never going to leave you nor forsake you, and that is why we do not have to fear. Now, fear, God did not create mankind with fear. He did not put us in a fearful environment. In fact, if you were to go back in the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis and look, fear did not show up until after Adam had sinned and fallen. You see, it was through that sin that condemnation, guilt, and shame came into mankind, came into Adam. And from that, he had a sense of separation away from God. That's why we see him running away from God rather than running to Him when he failed. In fact, he tried to fix his own problem with fig leaves, and that didn't work. I mean, common sense would tell you the fig leaves are going to dry out and fall off, all right? Going to have the same problem. So the problem that was created by man that caused the fear was fixed by God through Jesus in the finished work of His death, burial, and resurrection. When He got to the root of sin, He also dealt with the roots of fears, and that is all fears. Now, when we're talking about not fearing, when God says, "Do not fear, be strong and of good courage," He's not just going to leave it there. He also gives us a reason why we should not fear. See, there has to be a basis for fear and a basis to get rid of fear. In fact, if we want to replace fear in our life, we're going to have to displace it. Displacement and replacement with something else. Now, fear is actually perverted faith. We can put it this way: fear is faith turned upside down, or it's, opposite. Fear is actually faith in evil's ability to destroy us and bring destruction into our life. See, God intended for us to have faith that was pointed and focused and directed toward Him, but fear is focused away from God and onto what evil and what sin can do to destroy our life. Now, there's a good illustration of this over in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And we all know the story about David and Goliath. And Goliath came out morning and evening and threatened and challenged the armies of Israel to send somebody out to fight with him. Now, Goliath was anywhere from 9 to 12 feet tall. He would be a starter at center on any NBA basketball team today. We wouldn't call him shorty. So he was pretty good size. So when they saw him out there and all his armament, they were afraid and they were hiding behind the rocks. Now, David showed up one day bringing his brother's lunch, and he heard what Goliath was threatening, what he was challenging, and he was wondering why they were hiding behind the rocks, because David had a different perspective. See, it's not just what you see, it's how you see things. His perspective was God was with him. He was in covenant with God, and he could go out there and defeat Goliath just based on God being with him. See, fear was entering into the armies of Israel because they felt that they were separated away from God and his power. They did not compare Goliath the giant with God. They were comparing Goliath the giant with themselves, and they saw that they were coming up short, literally. But David went out there and he compared Goliath with God, and he said, he's no match for God. So that's why he ran out to the battle. That's why he didn't have a whole lot of armor. He knew that God was with him and he was going to grant him victory. And that perspective right there of God being with him caused him not to fear and run away from the challenge the way the armies of Israel did. See, that's good news for us today. God said he would never leave us nor forsake us, and that's the basis for us not being in fear. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. If you like additional resources, go to tonycowan.org, and we'll see you tomorrow.